Facebook Live up and rolling.
Is it rolling?
Oh, that's kind of crooked.
It's okay. I'm starting it up. I'm gonna close the door.
That looks better. Awesome. Cool. Alright, so everybody who's watching, thanks for tuning in, for watching this. I think we've got some good information to share with you from kind of a wide variety of opinions and people in the health and fitness realm. My name is Dr. Clay Sankey. I'm a chiropractor at True Motion Therapy in Charlotte, and I'm joined with Coty and Meg at Mountain Island CrossFit, or CrossFit Mountain Island. CrossFit Mountain Island. Yep. So I'll let these guys introduce themselves. You want to go first?
My name is Meg Carber. I am a registered dietitian with Total Nutrition Technology. I've got 2 offices, convenient, but TNT is all over the Charlotte area. I'm in Cornelius Lake Norman area and right around the corner here at Mountain Island as well. Like I said, I'm a registered dietitian, and my specialty is kind of autoimmune, digestive disorders, athletes, and eating disorders.
Very cool. So I'm Coty Bradburn. I own CrossFit Mountain Island, where we're at now. I'm a personal trainer, group fitness instructor, as well as just a lifestyle coach and helping people make changes and take control of their life. And
so, selling yourself a little short, been CrossFit Games, regional athlete.
Yeah, regional athlete.
Couple times.
Yeah, Wadapalooza athlete. We won Wadapalooza 2017, and we're about to go back this year and try and keep the title. So that's in January.
Cool.
So, yeah, and regionals last year. Yeah. Regionals next year, hopefully.
Cool. Yeah. Excellent. So, yes, we are in a CrossFit gym right now, but I think a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about can apply to athletes of any type. Even if you don't call yourself an athlete, this can certainly apply to you, because today we're really going to be talking about injury, just this huge topic of injury. I'm sure anybody who has a body and uses it has experienced an injury of some kind. I just went through a workout here with you guys, and body's feeling pretty good, but it's no surprise, like, you start to use your body a lot and you can become more prone to injury, especially, I think there's this, and Meg, I don't know how much experience you have like in the CrossFit world as well, but I think there is this public perception, I think it's an uneducated public perception that...
I call it a misconception.
Sure, absolutely, that, you're going to get injured if you're doing CrossFit, or you're more likely to get injured doing CrossFit. And although it's wrong, it's out there and it needs to be addressed. So I think that's something that we should address right now. And again, although we're talking about CrossFit, it can apply to a lot of things. The misconception, CrossFit will get you injured, or lifting heavy will get you injured. That's such a stronghold in so many people, and causing a lot of fear with movement, and it's something that I really want to address. But real quick, the reality is, I think, to summarize what we're going to talk about, the reality is that when you're coached properly, when you're programmed properly, lifting heavy, exposing yourselves to these different movements that CrossFit does, you're going to make yourself a more robust human being.
Absolutely. And
more capable of handling just the challenges of daily life. So, but injuries do happen, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if you could kind of expand a little bit on that, what your experience has been in kind of seeing athletes. I'm sure you've seen athletes get hurt, because it happens. It happens in every sport. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to just mind talking a little bit about kind of what you've seen, and then we can kind of get into why these injuries start to happen.
Yeah, for sure. So that's probably the biggest thing I hear from people is the biggest misconception is that they're going to get hurt. Two things: they saw people on TV that are doing their CrossFit Games, and they think that they're too big and they don't want to be like that, or it's too extreme, it's too intense, they're going to get hurt, they can't do it, or they have a friend that did CrossFit and got hurt, right? So, like Clay was saying, if you exercise, if you use your body for more than going to work, driving home, and sitting on the couch, you're going to run the risk of getting injured, right? Now, just because you're being active. If you're not active, there's no risk from that. But then that brings up a whole separate set of problems and disease. Okay, so the key is finding a CrossFit gym, and maybe it's CrossFit Mountain Island, maybe it's a CrossFit gym closer to you, maybe it's just a personal trainer. We're finding someone that has experience, that knows how to teach you proper movement mechanics, how to teach you proper movement patterns to make sure you're moving safely and well before they try to add weight. So intensity is why CrossFit works so well, right? Intensity is what makes it so effective. You can go to the gym, for 2 hours, like a regular style gym, 2-3 hours, do all these different movements at your own pace, go slow. But if you don't have that intensity, you're not going to reap the benefits, right? So CrossFit's an hour long. It's a class. We'll have a 10 to 20 minute strength portion, a 10 to 20 minute cardio portion, some warm ups, some cool downs. But what makes it work so well is having the intensity layered on, right? But before we can layer on that intensity, we need to establish proper mechanics. So that's where people get in trouble. Some coaches, maybe they don't have a good education, they don't have good experience, they're still new, they're not supervised, or the members aren't supervised as they should be, and then they'll start adding intensity, adding weight to mechanics that aren't perfect or are much less than perfect. Or they come into the gym and they have this ego or this perception that they need to impress the people around them, right? That's probably the biggest thing I see, is I'll see people get together in their group with their friends. They want to see who's the biggest and the baddest, or who's the strongest, like they have something to prove, and then they might not listen to that, that little gut feeling that says, hey, take a step back, hey, slow down, hey, we're not there yet. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. So what we need to do, or what my goal is with this facility, is to change people's lives, help them take control of their life. But to do that, I need to teach them the mechanics. They need to learn safe movement patterns. They need to make sure they understand the difference between a squat and a hinge, how to press without overextending their lower back, how to be safe and move well. Once you can move well, that gives us the opportunity to safely layer on intensity and start reaping those benefits.
Yeah, totally. You said a lot of awesome things there. Sure. I want to take it back a little bit because I really liked something you said real quickly. But it's that, we can go through these movements, these high intensity movements, and yeah, you could be, because you're doing that, you're putting yourself maybe at a little more of a risk of some of these injuries, but you're putting yourself, and this is something that you can touch on too, Meg, you're putting yourself at a much higher advantage when it comes to things like metabolic disease.
Yes,
and absolutely. I would so much rather see, I tell patients all the time, like, yes, you have this shoulder thing that's going on as a result of something you were doing lifting probably, but I would so much rather be treating you for this than type 2 diabetes or something like that. So there's this huge component that, yes, you are at a slightly higher risk for some musculoskeletal injury, but the thing that keeps you truly ticking, the metabolic side of things, you're much better off. And I'm sure you see that side of thing all the time.
Absolutely.
Well.
I mean, we know even a 10% reduction in weight can improve your risk of metabolic conditions, diabetes. Mm-hmm. I see clients every day that with nutrition alone can get off or reduce medications, but when we add in movement and quality movement, of course, you've got a little bit of a higher risk for injury, right? I loved what you said, like if you're using your body, right? There's always kind of that risk. But you're right, that you are starting off in such a better place in terms of the benefits you're receiving, that when we talk about then the risks, and especially when we've got a solution, right? Like the solution is, let's start from a really solid foundation and let's build up from there. Let's talk about how to have quality movement and good fuel so we do reduce your risk of injury, but we get all of those benefits. And you're right, that's awesome. A huge one.
Yeah, totally. So, and then going a little bit more into the stuff you said later, like some of these reasons for injury. So why do these injuries happen? We can kind of take a look a little bit closer into what people are doing in the gym to see exactly what's going on, and by understanding that, then we can prevent injury that much easier. So you were talking about technique. Technique is huge, right? It's a highly debated topic that we can get into another time, but just having the right technique for a squat, for a deadlift, when you're moving this, this heavy weight, it is important. It's important to protect your body in that regard. So poor technique is huge. You were saying, you talked a little bit about volume too. So too much volume. I'm a runner, so I thinking of things in terms of running a lot, but if you think of, you're running 10 miles a week, let's say, and then you jump it up to 40 miles a week. That's too much volume for you. So you can get there. You just need to scale it. So that's too much volume. And then another one, too much load. So you're just trying to move too much weight, too much load that you're not ready for yet. And if you take those last two things, too much volume, too much load, you're going to compromise technique, right? So it all kind of goes together a little bit. And then additionally, some things that people don't think about as much are those external factors. Like, how did you sleep the night before, or the few nights before leading up to what you were doing? What's your stress level like at work or at home? And what's your nutrition like? Right? That's absolutely huge. How did you recover after your last session? So I think it'd be cool if we talked a little bit about technique, and kind of these common movement faults that we see, and then maybe a little bit about nutrition, right, as well. So we kind of tie it all in a bit together. So let's make it just super simple, not get too broad with anything, but just two simple movements, squat and deadlift. So if we're talking back injuries, because that's probably that's the most common that I see, back and shoulder from CrossFit. So, when people, let's take deadlift first. The most common fault that we see in deadlift
is people not understanding how to hinge.
So
I've been a part of gyms that have coaches that, and like you said earlier, there's a debate on technique and movement patterns that people argue all day long, all the time. I've seen coaches that are of the mindset that they adapt more of a squat mechanic with a deadlift, and they have their reasons for that. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong, but my mindset is that it's a lot simpler and a lot more efficient for me to teach someone the difference between a squat and a hinge, because they're different. And I want to teach someone with a deadlift. My biggest priority is loading their hamstrings and posterior chain and establishing tension there before they leave the ground, versus having them get their hips lower like a squat, load their quads, and then as they come off the floor, try to have to worry about getting the bar around their knees, getting their knees out of the way, and then transitioning that load from their quads into their hamstrings without getting into the lower back and tweaking the lower back. And there's just so many things that can go wrong with that approach that I've seen, and I've seen it happen, I can't tell you how many times. I always emphasize out of the gate getting tension in the hamstrings and the posterior chain first, and getting a correct starting hinge position. And from there, it's just a hinge at the hip, and you're gonna stand up. Your back's working, but your back's isn't the main source of where you're getting load. It's an assistant to the bigger part of the movement. Versus using your back only for the movement. And that's gonna carry over to you picking up that bag of dog food, off the floor at the store or at your house. That's gonna carry over to you picking up that bag of mulch off the ground. You're not gonna throw your back out, because you're gonna understand how to hinge and load your posterior chain without stressing your back out.
So going back to making yourself a more resilient.
Exactly. So there's this quote I really love. I'm going to get on some shirts one day. It says, strong people are harder to kill. Right? Whether that's externally or internally with metabolic disease, the stronger you are, the more, like you said, the more durable you are. The more robust a human being you are. So we're all about building up strong people, fighting off the nursing home, fighting off assisted living, fighting off disease, because at the end of the day, if you can't touch your toes, there's a good chance you're probably going to not be self-sustaining for very much longer. So that's awesome. So when people go into deadlift, one of the most common faults that you see is they almost do it more like a squat. Sometimes. Because they think that if their hips are too high, they're going to hurt their back. But in reality, if your hips are too low and your hamstrings aren't engaged, your body's not going to know what to do. And you're going to piss your back off, because you're going to have to pull around your knees. So it's a big misconception.
So then when going into a squat, what are just a few common things that you see in your experience?
So what I see often with squatting is either people they don't know how to use their hips and their glutes because they sit in a chair all day and they're never using them anyways. So those muscles are dormant. The pathways from the brain there aren't developed and efficient, so your brain doesn't know what you're trying to make it do. So they don't use their hips, they don't use their glutes. They squat down in their toes, and they stress out their knees without using their posterior chain. Or I see people that overwork their posterior chain and hinge their hip back like a deadlift, and instead of the squat, they're hinging like a deadlift, and then the weight on their shoulders is getting way up here, their center of mass is here, and they're stressing out their lower back. They don't understand that they need to sit down with an upright torso between their feet and keep that weight stacked over their hips, stacked over their shoulders, stacked over their hips, stacked over their feet. So then they have all this stability and power here versus weights out here, stability's out here, and we have all this room for things to go wrong.
Yep.
So that's the most common thing I see. Those two things.
And something interesting that I didn't hear you mention at all is mobility, which it's because so many people when they get into these, when they try to, maybe it holds them back from squatting because they don't think they have the mobility or they think they're injured because of poor mobility. A lot of times that's not the case at all.
Not always,
it really just comes down to, can you control this movement?
Yes,
like they just need to be taught how to do it. It's not that your hardware is off. It's more of like a software issue. And those things are so much quicker to change.
So much easier to change.
And so if you're trying to change tissue length, you can argue all day whether you can actually do that. Having, just making these, like having these cues that you guys do here, like I just was in your class here, and these little cues just made things so much easier. And I didn't have to foam roll for an hour prior to doing it. It was just, I had the hardware. I just needed, my software.
That's the biggest thing. And that's figured out. That's why I love the CrossFit models, because you're in a group with friends, but you also have a coach. So I was in the world of doing things by myself, headphones in, thinking I know what I was doing, but I had no idea what I was doing. And just having someone there that's watching you and knows what to look for and how to fix it is a huge factor, right? That's a huge benefit. So like you said, mobility is going to be big. Most people, they need some mobility work, but it's not the end-all, be-all. If we can fix your mechanics to start, we can slowly, because you're not going to get your mobility back in a day or a week. That's going to be a year, 2 year, 3 year journey to get back to as best we can your mobility. But that doesn't mean you can't exercise and you can't start that journey as soon as possible. There's definitely, they definitely go together. For sure. It's not black and white, they're not polar. For sure. And that's with the squat and the deadlift. So we're always trying to fix squat mobility, but that takes time.
I'm just gonna lounge here for a second.
Yeah, this is a lounge.
So talked a lot about technique for these movements. Now this is like huge, just asking you like, okay, what do I eat now?
What do I eat? Because that's more important than what I do. I'm important, but if you don't have your diet fixed,
appreciate that.
Right.
I'm serious. Like, I think nutrition is like, people like to say that it's working out. It's at least 60, 50, 50, 60, 40.
Yeah.
Like at least.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as the dietitian, we always say it's 80-20. Like it's 80% what you eat, it's 20% how you exercise, your physique, your health, all those kind of things. So nutrition, $1 million question. What do I eat, right? I think when it comes to injury and nutrition, one of the most common mistakes that I see is just simply not eating enough. Right? So I always tell people, think of your body as an engine and think of your nutrition as fuel. Quality and quantity matter. So if you're not eating enough, if there's not enough gas in your tank, what happens? Your engine starts to run dry, your car stops, right? And if you think about quality of fuel, if you put premium in your car, it's going to run more efficiently, it's going to run better, right? So number one mistake that I see is that people just don't eat enough. For some reason, all women think they need 1,200 calories and all men think they need 2,000, and I don't know where this came from, but one of the first things I address with people is no. No. Everybody's different, right? Everybody's needs are different. That's the benefit of working with someone like me, is I'm sitting with you and I'm individualizing it to you. Kind of like we're talking about with Coty. CrossFit benefit is he's there giving those little cues to help you along. I'm giving you those individualized cues to make sure you're fueling enough. So number one mistake I see before we even get into the quality is that the quantity is just not there for people. And especially when it comes to things like protein, I explain that like building blocks. You need those quality building blocks there. We know that building muscle is tearing those muscle fibers and tissues down to build them back up stronger than they were. If you don't have enough gas in the tank to do so, and if you don't have enough quality building blocks, you're going to build some kind of not so quality muscles, right? And then they're going to be more prone to injury and tearing and that kind of stuff. So eating enough is very critical for sure. And beyond that, I think that people need to just realize that we need a variety of whole foods. just to kind of keep it simple, right? Like, we all need carbs, we all need protein, we all need fat. None of them are scary. None of them are going to make you sick or make you fat. And getting it from a variety of sources is really critical to me. Something I commonly say to my clients who think that they eat super clean is, even if you eat really clean, but you eat the same things all the time, you run the risk that you're only going to get a certain amount of nutrients, right? The whole purpose of getting a variety of foods and a variety of colors in your diet is that each one gives you a different nutrient, macros and micronutrients. So I think that we are starting to think nutritionally in terms of, are there deficiencies that play into injury risk? Is there just overall lack of a certain macronutrient, or just total energy is not there? You're just not eating enough in general. And I loved how you touched on too, injury and sleep and stress. Something I commonly, and we've talked about this before, something I commonly harp with my clients on is really a total approach to wellness. They might come to work with me thinking we're going to talk only about nutrition, and we spend just as much time talking about stress management and self-care, quality sleep, hydration, and good movement, right? It's what I kind of call the 5 pillars of health. I want to know, are my clients eating well? Are they hydrated? Managing their stress? Sleeping well, and are they moving, right? So we know in a setting like CrossFit Mountain Island, you're getting that quality movement. That's what we're talking about today, is let's build that strong foundation of those good movements. But sleep and stress are not talked about as much as they should be, right? I mean, we know short sleep equals short life. There's an all-risk mortality increase when you don't sleep enough. I mean, that's pretty crazy, right? So really, that little saying of, I'll sleep when I'm dead, not a good one. Not a good one. Sooner than later, you're right. So I think spending enough time to kind of evaluate, how am I doing in all these other areas? Like, yes, I'm getting quality movement. Yes, I'm working on my injuries and preventing further. But if I only sleep 5 hours a night and my stress level is through the roof, I'm really doing myself a disservice. Absolutely. And those two things, although they may sound simple, are challenging for a lot of people in this day and age, and can really delay recovery time. So I think just as much as getting enough fuel in the tank and focusing on quality of fuel in the tank, people really need to evaluate, can I get better sleep, and am I doing everything I can to manage my stress and spend time in self-care, really.
Yeah. I kind of like to talk to my patients about, think of your capacity to handle the stress that you put on your body as a cup. Right. So every little stress that you pour into that cup can lead to your likelihood of getting injured. So maybe you're getting 5 hours sleep a night. That's filling up that cup a little bit. You're eating, fast food every day. That's filling up a little bit more. And then maybe you're moving improperly. You're lifting more than you should, or something like that. That's filling up your cup a little bit more. So when it overflows, that's when you have an injury happen. So it's important to look back, look at what's going on in your life, and say, okay, what are these things that's filling up my cup, and can I just reduce one of them?
Yep,
right?
Exactly.
Can I just get my 8 hours of sleep, and then so it's not like you're trying to make a huge life change all at once. Let's try to make those little things matter. And I do like how you were talking about the variety in your diet. Because we have like our actual diet that we need variety in, but then we have our movement diet as well. Where the cool thing about CrossFit is it does expose you to this variety of movement. So having this variety in your life is huge, I believe, as well.
Absolutely.
Good. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about, injuries do happen. Right?
Yeah,
we said that they're going to happen. It's a part of life, and I do think injuries are an opportunity to learn more about your body and to learn why they happened and how you can prevent them in the future. So let's talk a little bit about, if an injury does happen, what we can do.
For sure.
Real simply, kind of what I like to take people through, it's when an injury happens, let's just say you did a bunch of deadlifts the day before.
Sure.
Perhaps your form wasn't great, and you've caused a sensitivity in your low back. That's all I'm going to call it, is a sensitivity. People worry about blowing a disc or pulling a muscle. Very often it's not. It's just, your spine is such an important structure that your brain is gonna send a pain signal long before anything actually rips or breaks. So that's a really cool feature. If we think of it as a sensitivity, then it can ease your mind a little bit. So what we need to do is we need to temporarily remove the thing that's causing the sensitivity. So if it was deadlifting that caused the issue and rounding forward, we just need to temporarily remove that from your daily routine just for a little bit, right? Sure. But we can do other things. So we can. It doesn't mean we have to stop moving altogether, which is great. So if it's reaching down to the floor to grab a barbell, if that's what bothered you, then what are some of these other things that we can do if we still want to stay in shape and keep moving and maybe continue to work on that hip hinge pattern? Right?
So, that's so true. So, I mean, more often than not, I have people come in that have had some kind of injury in the past, and they're trying to work through that. They're trying to reclaim range of motion, reclaim strength, and just not let that control the direction of their life, right? So, or someone might, be a member, they might overdo it one day. Maybe they made a small technique error, or they had just too much volume, and they weren't ready for it. And then you're right, they have like a sensitivity in their lower back or their hips. So some ways we can work around that, and that's why CrossFit is so great, because it's infinitely scalable. We can always modify to where you're at and meet you where you're at. There's no like prerequisite level of fitness. There's no prerequisite movement patterns you have to have. It's literally about just wherever you're at, that's where we're going to start. We're going to build up from there, right? If someone were to come to my gym and maybe they came from another gym where they hurt their back or they'd overdone it the day before, some really simple fixes to keep working that hip hinge mechanic without overdoing it. We could get some bands, work on some banded hinging where they're under load, but they don't have to go down and grab a barbell and go through a full range of motion. They could still work the hinge mechanic, learn to hinge their hips back, load their posterior chain without rounding forward. We could have them do deadlifts from blocks. So we just raise where that barbell is sitting and where that bar path goes. So rather than reaching down to their shins where the bar is on the ground, we can raise that bar up so the knees are above the knees and go through the range of motion and load the muscles that are not hypersensitive at the time and still work that hinge mechanic and work on strengthening them up. And then as they get stronger, we can start working our way back down. That's how I typically like to teach movement anyways, is starting from the center and working out, because you have the most control. The closer you are to your core, the farther weight gets from your core, the less control you're going to have. So I'd rather start you out strong here and slowly add leverage and add weight and add that intensity as you have that strong base.
Right. Yeah. So that's awesome. Somebody has that sensitivity. Yep. We scale the movement back for them. Maybe it's to the extent where we actually do have to take some time off.
For sure.
Right. So we actually can't jump into that right away. Yeah. But once you can, we can scale it, and it's not like we have to jump right back into it. And the nice thing is you're telling your brain that, hey, this movement's okay, it's safe, let's just get back into it in a slightly smarter way. Perhaps we need to get some therapy done as well. Always checking in with your doctor of choice, right? Your chiropractor, your physical therapist.
I see a PT or chiro at least once a week.
Yeah. Just making sure everything's looking good from the medical standpoint.
For sure.
That's absolutely huge. But then just getting back in and telling your brain that movement's okay and not getting freaked out by it.
And the best thing is being able to work with those chiros and PTs together and be on the same page and communicating, with the person that's locking your diet, the person that's locking in your movement patterns and your PT and making sure you're coming back strong and you're healing and you're getting treated. And we all work as a group to ease that person back into where they need to be without overdoing it.
Exactly. And that's the cool thing about having these conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
Learning that we're all on the same page and knowing that we can all speak the same language about stuff, and that if you have an athlete coming to me, they're going to be getting the same message.
Exactly.
That I'm not going to be telling them something like, "Oh my gosh, you can't be lifting that." Yeah. What are you talking about? And then you're like, "Oh, you can't lift it," and then it's just they're so confused and they just sit on the couch and don't do anything. Yeah. So that's that stuff in terms of movement is great. We can scale things back. If you hurt yourself squatting, you could do split squats if it's so there's always options, and it's just good to have somebody in your corner who you can talk to through those options.
For sure.
So, some of these injuries, they can stir up a little bit of inflammation in the body, and it's important to have nutrition dialed, especially when you're going through these injuries. So if you could touch on that a little bit, if you have a client who is working through something, whether it's just a minor low back tweak or a full-on rotator cuff tear or something like that, what kind of recommendations you give?
So this is something I actually deal with on a day-to-day basis, regardless of if they're a CrossFitter, if they're active, if they have an injury, because we know the root of all disease is in inflammation, right? Even obesity is an inflammatory condition. I actually love your analogy, and I love that spin on it, because I usually explain it in terms of inflammation. Every single day we're exposed to inflammatory things in our food supply, stress level adds to, there's all these things. So that cup of inflammation kind of builds and builds, and then it spills over. And one of my primary jobs when I'm working with a client who I'm just having all of these red flags go off that they are in this inflamed state, some level of inflammation post-injury acutely is essential. That's the body's healing process. But when we let it go on too long, or when it was pre-existing and not the right kind, it wasn't there for a purpose, we need to try to look at that cup and what we're putting in there and figure out what can I do to help reduce inflammation. It's no secret that our food supply has changed a lot. Just a lot, absolutely. Right? Yes. I'll just leave it at that. That's another great debate. I'm just going to leave that topic right there. But, I think something that's really common, and something, again, we're trying to kind of really look into a little more deeply, is just how often are you eating foods that are inflammatory to you. I'm really excited about a new service our company's rolling out. It's MRT, food sensitivity testing. It's not new, it's just new to us, and I just sent my blood vials off as fast as I could to find out, because I think that, on a day-to-day basis, we're exposed to things in our food supply that we don't even realize are already pro-inflammatory. So we're just kind of exacerbating that, worsening it, and what that means is it's going to take longer to recover, right? So another thing you mentioned, which I wanted to touch on too, a little different perspective, is, the brain sends that pain signal long before, but we got to be mindful. We got to pay attention to it, right?
Sure.
You need to learn to listen to your body, and that's one of the things I love about CrossFit, is it teaches you to listen to your body. A lot of what I'm doing with clients when we're talking about nutrition is building a level of mindfulness and awareness about what am I putting in my body, how does it affect me and make me feel, how does this movement make me feel, did I listen to that pain signal before it was too late, and now I'm out for the count with this injury. So I think being mindful of those messages is really critical. And then again, from that nutrition inflammation perspective, every person is different. Every person's inflammatory foods are going to be different. So if you do think you've got something going on, or even if you don't, maybe think about it. I think sometimes I open people's eyes to the fact that maybe what they're doing is delaying recovery, or kind of shooting them in the foot a little bit, if you will. So thinking about ways to reduce that inflammation from a nutrition perspective, really common ones would be not eating enough protein, and then eating foods that you're sensitive to. Gluten and dairy are always a great debate and a hot topic right now, but especially with the way our food supply has changed, there's a lot more genetically modified foods and additives, and one of those old memes I always see circulate is like, if you don't recognize an ingredient on a list, your body doesn't either, and that equals inflammation. And that's a pretty simple way to put it, and that's why I really broadly, on purpose, answered that question of what do I eat? Just eat real food. Just eat whole foods.
People make it too complicated.
Way too complicated. Way too complicated.
Absolutely.
I think hydration is really important too. I didn't really talk a whole lot about that, but sometimes that's often overlooked, and it can be a really simple solution for people. But cute beverages. Cheers. Hydration is really critical too, and it always amazes me, but it shouldn't anymore, at just how little people actually drink.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, no kidding. Good. I think that was a pretty good, kind of well-rounded conversation about injury from a movement perspective, from a nutrition perspective. Do you guys have anything else before we kind of close out? Tell people where we can, where they can find out more about you. Anything else you want to touch on, or anything like that?
I think that was just right.
Cool.
Enough information.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Excellent. So, Meg, if people want to find out more about you or seek your your services, where can they reach out?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll tag all of our social media things, and I know we're all going to share this. Like I said, my name is Meg Carber. I am a dietitian. I'm actually a Blue Cross Blue Shield provider too, so a lot of my clients use their insurance to come see me. I do individualized nutrition counseling, but we also do an array of testing to help you, perform your best and feel your best. Metabolic testing, DNA testing, micronutrient deficiency testing. My offices are in the Lake Norman area and right around here in Mountain Island area, but I also work remotely. So I guess look below here somewhere for my email or some way to contact me.
Yeah, cool. And Coty?
Yeah, so I'm Coty Bradburn again. I own CrossFit Mountain Island, so we're in Mountain Island. We're about 5 miles from uptown Charlotte. It's a pretty easy drive. We're off the interstate. We're right in the heart of Huntersville, North Lake, and Charlotte. We're right in the middle. So again, you can find me at CrossFit Mountain Island on Instagram and Facebook, or Coty Bradburn on both of those platforms as well.
Cool. And Clay Sankey, chiropractor at True Motion Therapy. We're just right in South Charlotte. If you want to reach out, you can always email me, clay@truemotiontherapy.com, Instagram, True Motion Therapy. So if you're watching this, you probably already access pretty well. So yeah,
but when we share it, they'll find you too.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. So thanks a lot, guys, for listening. I hope you found it helpful. If you want us to talk about anything more in the future, expand upon anything that we did talk about today, please drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear it. So,
absolutely.
all right. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Clay.